Uh, Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining this webinar today. My name is Tim Nordstrom, Product Manager of Everything Gate Operator here at Controlled Products. You're here today to learn all about the brand new LiftMaster TECHNA barrier gate operator. It's a very exciting gate operator, very feature packed. I think you'll be, if you haven't already seen the machine, I think you will be pleasantly surprised with the features that they've added to this barrier gate operator. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sarah Brown, the Senior Product Manager at Chamberlain, who is basically leading the launch of this wonderful product. Sarah, take it away.
Thank you. So today I'm going to be talking to you about our new barrier gate operator. So we're going to be launching this on the 28th. So I'm going to go over a few things today in our webinar. One of them is going to be kind of why did we do this project, talking about the technical features as well as how we're working to build awareness of this in the market and then being market ready. So what are some challenges that are facing us today? Realistically, these are the same challenges that we've had for a while. Labor challenges, finding good labor, finding labor at a price point that makes sense, and then also making that investment in training people is becoming more difficult. So when you look across the industry, when you do find a good person and train them, it's also difficult because sometimes they become a competitor if they decide to move away. Complicated installations and maintenance. So in a lot of cases I think we've been looking at it recently, about 70% of gate operators that are placed are for retrofits. And as new technologies are coming out related to connectivity as well as features related to safety, et cetera, we're seeing that installations are becoming more complicated. So making sure that you can integrate those products together to reach the customer expectations. Speaking of customer shifts, a lot of customers are wanting more secure and more connected systems. They want to have better control of who has access to a facility. And then also when you're looking at equipment failures, you have to factor in that if you're working on fixing something, you can't be working on doing an installation. So balancing that aspect of maintenance versus, replacement or new installations. So really what end users as well as, installers are looking for is for a product that they really don't need to think about once they install it. It's going to work in the majority of environments, temperature, weather, that type of thing, as well as provide that level of security and safety that's desired. And then also for the customers that do want to connect, they want that visibility as to what's going on at the gate, as well as to be able to remotely operate the gate in a lot of cases. So looking at the new technology, I don't know if you can hear this.
No audio, but that's okay.
Pardon me?
No audio.
So kind of looking at why we made the changes that we did. So I ran a pretty extensive voice of customer Through that voice of customer, we found that for our existing product, while the MAT has been in the market for a very long time, over 20 years, for new people that are coming into the field, the operator isn't necessarily the most straightforward thing for them to learn. You know, there's a lot of nuances related to wiring. There's a special relay required to be able to do a SAM system. Just a lot of little things that if it's your first time installing it, or you walk up to an operator, if you're not familiar with it, it becomes an exercise to be able to service it. So, you know, there's opportunities related to how we manage maintenance on that product. So, if you're familiar, you have to count pulsing, flashing lights to be able to tell what is going on from a maintenance perspective. We don't currently have green LED arms, which is something that the field has been requesting for quite some time, as well as there's a lot of shipping costs associated with those arms if you order them individually. You have the special wiring for the trap or sequence access management system. In a lot of cases, if you don't run the correct number of wires, it becomes a headache to get that attached. Brushed DC motor with a belt-driven system. There's not really a good slow start and stop, so that arm bounces quite a bit. And then really, we purchased the company that sold these operators 20 plus years ago. And we've never really developed a LiftMaster product. So the one that we're going to be coming out with is truly a LiftMaster operator. So the MAT itself is going to be replaced with this. There's going to be 3 different phases of this launch. The 28th is when we're going to be launching the MA and MAT replacement. So the way to think about this is kind of the application. If you have a commercial or a community application, you're going to want the CBG, which is the commercial barrier gate. If it's parking, that's going to replace the sprinters or the MAS and MAST. Those are going to be coming out late July. So that's going to be your PBG, which is your parking barrier gate. And then for industrial, which is going to replace our wishbone operator, the BG790, it's going to be the IBG or the industrial barrier gate operator. The length of the arm, so we'll get into that a little bit further, is now going to be based off of the functional length and not the physical length of the arm, which drove a lot of confusion for which arm was needed in the field. And then the speed is going to be held similar for the MA and the MAT. That does include electronic braking. For the parking, it's going to be 1.9 seconds. And for the 790 replacement for the industrial, it's going to be 6 seconds. And one thing to keep in mind when you're comparing different operators and their performance is that not all operators in the field include that soft start and stop time. So when you're, comparing operators, make sure that you're looking at whether or not they base it off of the maximum arm length and whether or not they're including that soft start or stop, just so that you can try to compare apples to apples. Overall, on the improvements that we made, we really wanted to focus on practical things. One of them being we modified the control board of the operator, and when we get into it, it'll look somewhat familiar, and that's on purpose. We wanted it to feel the same as our other gate operator control boards so that it would be easy to adopt. And then on top of that, we've added a interface menu so that you can get better information and that the operator is easier to set up overall. We do have a new arm bracket, so not only will you have the ability to choose the orientation of the arm in the field, you have flexible arm bracket orientation, but we also have the ability to detect if a strike happens and shut the operator down, and if the operator is connected, communicate that to the cloud. All of the operators now have a 360-degree light feature on the tower. So that integrated light has both red and green LEDs. So when the arm is in motion, you can give more feedback to your customers as to what's going on with the arm. You also have the ability to light that. And then The operator also has benefited from an upgrade in the motor. So if you're familiar with the LiftMaster IN or IHSL operators that have come out recently, we've used a modified version of that 24-volt brushless DC motor, and it is a direct drive system instead of being belt driven. And then finally, easily change arm directions. We'll walk through that. And then because this operator is getting upgraded, we also wanted to make sure it can connect to MyQ. So there's some integrated connectivity that we'll talk through as well.
Hey, Sarah,
Yeah.
got a quick question.
Mhm.
For that remote monitoring, the MyQ, are there fees associated with that?
So facility is free. If you connect the operator through a CAP system, and we'll talk a little bit later about how the different things talk to each other. But this operator has 900 megahertz now, where the old operators did not. So you'll be able to connect wirelessly to a CAP device if you want to, and get those diagnostic codes like you would with our other gate operators. So that in that case, in community, it would count as a door. If you connect it to facility, you'll get some basic capabilities related to, being able to see what's going on at the gate and open and close it remotely.
Thank you.
Yep. So again, what we'll get into is the ARM technology, making sure that you're aware of what the SKU offering is and kind of how we've simplified things. Upgraded our product durability. So this is now a continuous duty operator. These have been cycling constantly for over a year now in our labs, and we'll get into some of that lab testing that we do. We'll walk through some of the diagnostics and technical support, and then also we'll talk through some of the training available as well as some of the smart features. So just kind of looking in the cabinet, we'll do a little walk. So once you remove the cabinet front door, so this actually slides off, inside of that cabinet door, there's a full color wiring diagram as well as all of the diagnostic codes and the basic troubleshooting steps associated with that. So we wanted to make sure that that was available. And then in addition to that, in the lid, so when you hinge the operator lid open, there's a quick start guide that's going to be placed on the inside of that lid that gives you some basic information around how to set up the operator in case someone doesn't look at the full manual. We've gotten some feedback that people don't want to read the 70 pages. That being said, the control board interface is at the top of the operator. It's very easy to access. One of the things I wanted to be able to make sure of is once we wired the operator, you could pretty much sit on a 5-gallon bucket if you needed to do anything mechanically or stand while you're actually doing your programming to make it a little more ergonomic. So we do have this counterbalance system. So this is what gets rid of your counterweight, and we'll get into more detail there. But you have basically your junction box, transformer, motor drive board, your gearbox. The motor sits on top of here. There is an encoder, and then you get into your main control board and your auxiliary control boards. One of the things that we wanted to make sure of is that this had more flexibility with environments that it can work on and utilize existing accessories where possible. So you will be able to use the 3-phase converter if you don't have 120 or 240 voltage. And basically you can use that accessory to convert odd voltages, like if you have 208 or 3-phase to a single phase 120. You also have the ability to use our standard gate operator heaters now. So if you're in an environment where you need a heater, so the gate's going to get below -4 degrees Fahrenheit, you're going to want to make sure that you can, install a heater, and it's going to be the same one that you use with your other gate operators, which is the HTR. We've gone through the internal counterbalance system and some of the other items. This will have a 3-year warranty. A 2-year warranty. The other thing that's important to point out is that there's 2 different there's two different colorways. So at the end of the SKU, there's going to be a W or a G. The W is for white and the G is for gray. So just keep that in mind that we do offer this in two colors. Those two colors are both standard, so there's not, you know, a long lead time on one versus the other. But really that's the designation between the two SKUs is the W and G for white and the kind of LiftMaster dark gray. Okay, so kind of getting into the main board. Looking at the main board, really these inputs should look extremely similar. We did put light indicators in place. For if you do need to troubleshoot, you can see basically a solid light means that there's a direct input. A flashing light means that it's waiting or getting a signal from an external device. And then if the light is off, that means that it's inactive. So that's really going to help you when you're troubleshooting your system or you're setting your system up so that you can kind of understand how those inputs are being mapped. In addition to that, you'll also notice here that the power supply for accessories has increased. On the current operator, it's 0.5 amp, and we've gone to 1 amp of accessory power, so it's more similar to our other boards. You also have the ability to use our solar kit. So if you want to upgrade to solar, you would basically add a 33 amp hour battery. To, you know, 33 amp hour batteries to your system. There's a tray accessory to basically keep that second battery off of the ground. And then you can use the existing LiftMaster solar kit. You also have two different auxiliary boards. So this is going to make it so that you can use our plug-in loop detectors, as well as you will have 5 programmable relays on this board.
Sarah, we have a question. I'll just jump in here.
Yeah.
What, if any, types of lightning protection are available on this unit?
Yeah, so similar to our MAT and other operators, we do test for power surges. So basically, if you do get a lightning strike and it does impact the operator, it's going to cause the board to fail first before other components in the operator. But we did do lightning testing. I don't recall off the top of my head how much energy we put into the system. It does not protect for direct lightning strikes. It basically protects for if there's a lightning strike in the area and there's some type of power surge.
Thank you.
Yep. But I do believe we have like best in class testing for the lightning procedures. So, you know, looking here as well, so you have the ability to upgrade your batteries. It will still come standard with the two 12-volt 7 amp hour batteries, and then you can upgrade it to the two 12-volt 33 amp hour batteries if you'd like. With those existing batteries, you're going to get 2 different things that you have to do. You can choose whether or not you want the batteries on AC power fail to be active. And if you do want it to be active, there's a separate option in the menu interface that basically allows you to choose whether or not you want it to fail safe, which is open, or fail secure, which is down. So, you know, if you get through that, you know, 5 days of standby time, or if you get through those 500 cycles, whichever comes first, you're going to have the ability to kind of choose how it fails in that power outage. And then us going to 5 days with the same battery versus 3 is another improvement versus the old operator. And then for the service parts, you will be able to use one board across all 3 of the operators once they're out. It has an ID resistor and the wire harness that's going to identify which board that is and then populate the firmware. Just an important thing to call out is your EMI board is going to come wired for 120. You're going to want to switch that over to 240 if that's your power supply prior to turning the operator on. And it's automatically going to make it so that these two outlets don't work if you do that. So that's just an important call out. Arm bracket features. So this is actually the display interface that you will see in the menu. So it's a full color display. And basically, you have the ability to choose whether or not you have the lights on or off on the tower. And then you also have the ability to change the signal for the LEDs on the arm as well. So basically, when the arm is in the down position, it's going to be red. When it's moving, it's going to be flashing. And when it's up, it's off for red only. If you were to select green, basically this would change from off to green. So you do have the flexibility there. You no longer need to route any wires to get the LED strip to work. So previously you had to drill into the cabinet and there was a separate driver for the LEDs on the arm. That's not the case anymore. There's a little wire harness on the bracket. And basically all you need to do is plug that LED strip that comes with your LED arm into that connector, and then you're good to go versus having to route wires. You have a few different ways that you can mount the arm, so we can talk about that in the next slide. And then there is a magnetic sensor that gets mounted to the arm, and then there's one that's native to the bracket. And basically when those two are connected, it's going to allow the operator to run. When they're not connected, it's going to shut the power off to the motor, but that board's going to stay awake so it can continue to alert if connected to MyQ. So looking at the arm bracket, this looks quite different than what we have today. So there's really two main orientations. If you're familiar with our current product, you know that when you strike the arm, it will break the shear pin and the nylon nuts, and those are the sacrificial parts to protect the operator and make sure that the arm detaches. So you still have the ability to do that. There's two pre-drilled holes in the front of the arm. And what those holes allow you to do is put two through bolts in with nylon nuts and washers. And that nylon nut, again, is going to be the sacrificial part that allows the arm to break off in the case of a strike. You could permanently fix it if you wanted to. You're basically just choosing to potentially damage the bracket or the output shaft of the gearbox. So it's really choosing what part you would potentially want to fail along the way. The other option is swing away. So that arm is also drilled for a through pin. So if you want the arm to swing away instead of physically break off, and you're in a situation where that's safe, and when I say safe, I mean it's not going into any walkways, there's not any curving lanes, there are no obstructions that would be in place to where when that arm swings, it could hit something else. If that's the case, what you would do is you would put that pin through the arm, and then these bracket retainers here. So you have steel and then a few pieces of plastic that hold the arm snug, are going to keep the arm in place while it's operational. And then if someone hits it, it will swing away. They can push it back into place if the arm is not severely damaged. And once that magnetic sensor comes into contact again, there's a 5-second delay, and then the operator is going to start working. The other thing to call out here is, again, these arms are going to come in segments. You will just order the arm length that you need, and we will send the appropriate segments that you need. You don't need to worry about mixing and matching things. What we wanted to do was make sure that you have a super stable joint, but you're also able to fit the arms in your truck, as well as avoid a lot of shipping surcharges associated with the arms. And then in a lot of cases, we have issues where customers are dissatisfied because we cover the cost of a damaged arm in transit, but we don't necessarily cover the cost of the transit that you paid. So if you look at what is most likely to get damaged, unfortunately, it's those 17-foot arms that we're shipping in the back of an LTL truck if you just order one arm. So to avoid that, we've made a sturdy aluminum extrusion. Basically, there's an insert here that's going to come in half of the arm. So all you're going to do is slide basically the female onto the male part. You have fasteners that go around the arm, 8 of them. And then those arm fasteners also have Loctite on them to secure that in place. If you do have arm strikes, you're going to want to just make sure that all of those are still present. Outside of that, we have arms that have had over 5 million cycles on them when they haven't been struck. And we haven't really seen any issues with joint instability or sagging. It took us quite a few iterations to get to that stable arm, but we're definitely there. So this is the new naming convention for the arms. I try to keep everything very simple. So you have BG arm, barrier gate arm, and then the length. And then if you want LED, you're going to order LED. So just going back quickly, there is a channel on both sides of the arms, and then there's a channel at the base of the arm. You can kind of see with this profile here. For the LED kits, basically what it's going to do is you're going to get the same arm overall, and then it will come with an LED strip. And then what you do is you pull that LED strip kind of by the cable through that slot in the arm, depending on which side you want it on. And then you're going to route that cable and connect it to the connector that I talked about. And then the other thing that can fit into the base of the arm, we will have a BG arm foam, which is basically a foam insert to act as kind of a bumper in case there's any vehicular issues, where, you know, there's lots of strikes in an area and you want to avoid scratches on a vehicle. The other thing that you can do is this operator is compatible with monitored safety devices now. So it is not required, but if you want to connect a monitored photo eye or edge, you can. So for the wireless edge kit, you would basically just mount the transmitter on the arm and the receiver on the outside of the operator and route those wires through. And then you would put the small profile edge that comes in a roll on the underside. You wouldn't need to mount anything with like an aluminum bracket. So these can accept monitor devices, whether it's photo eyes or the wireless edge, if you choose to use them for additional protection, or if you do find yourself in a situation where you create an entrapment zone.
Sarah, we have a question.
Yeah.
It says, can the arm sensor, the magnet, be connected to an external device such as an NVR to trigger recordings for gate arm strikes or something like that?
I do not know. So the harness itself is so there's the magnet, and then there's basically a wire harness that connects to the operator and then goes into our board. I know that when that basically magnet is no longer in contact, it will send an alert to our board. I don't know if you would also be able to use that somehow to trigger. I'm guessing you're asking in case there's like a camera connected. I know that if you have it connected to MyQ, it will give you a timestamp. Otherwise, in the error codes, it will give you a cycle number that it happened on. So unfortunately, I don't know if you can use that magnetic sensor and that arm harness to be able to trigger anything else. So again, the length of the arm is now not based off of the physical length, because of the operator being a different size, making the same physical length didn't make sense. So having the opportunity for a new designation of naming, it's basically from the edge of the operator out. So you will have from the edge of the operator out into the lane, 10 feet, 12 feet, or 14 feet of coverage, depending on the arm that you buy. Again, the CBG 24 DCW, the white operator, or the gray are compatible with up to 14-foot arms. And then the parking, because it's faster, is compatible with up to 12. The parking will release later in the year, and we can do another update once we have that out. But basically, the difference between the cabinets physically is the parking is going to have an integrated alarm to alert pedestrians if you want to activate that. And then it's also going to have PEM studs to be able to mount articulating arms. So the commercial operator will not be compatible with articulating arms. So I just want to call that out because that's an important distinction versus our existing product. So the spring system, there's kind of two things that you need to know here. So there's handing and then there's balancing out the system. So these springs might look a little intimidating or different, but they're basically, instead of extension springs like you would see in a car shock, they're coil springs. So they wind in on themselves like a clock spring. And basically what this is a bunch of coils or clock springs that do the same amount of work. And what they do is they transfer some of the work off the motor and they balance that arm when it's in motion. When the arm is down, the system is sprung. And as the arm is moving into the up position, it's basically removing that tension. So in order to change handing, the operator actually comes with a bracket attached on the inside of it. So when you take that bracket out, you're always going to orient the arm in the vertical position prior to tightening it down to be able to set the limits. You can attach it horizontally and kind of swing it up so that it's not a ton of work. I know attaching a 14-foot arm in the vertical position is hard. So if you want to swing it up, tighten that bracket down, and then when you go to provision your limits, you don't really have anything additional to do in terms of handing there. If you do need to change the handing, there are arrows that are on the springs. The arm direction should match the direction of those arrows. If it does not, so it comes standard right-handed, which covers about 80% of applications. But if you have a left-handed application, so if you're standing at the cabinet with the lid open and your arm's going to be facing left when it's down, what you're going to do is you're going to take out these 3 bolts that are in the back. You're going to flip or rotate this 180 degrees, and then you're going to replace those bolts in these 3 spots. That's it. That's all you need to do to change handing. If you have an arm that is less than 14 feet long, because this is going to come with the maximum number of springs you would need, what you're going to do is there's a chart in a couple locations. There's a chart in your quick start guide, there's a chart in your manual, and then there's a chart on your door. So what you're going to do is basically say, I have my arm, what accessories do I have? So I have a 10-foot arm and I have an LED strip. I need 5 springs. So you're going to basically disassemble this end plate, remove the number of springs and spacers that you don't need. You can place them at the bottom of the cabinet or keep them with you for service parts. And then you're going to add some retainer collars to basically hold all those springs tight and then basically reassemble this. So that's what you have to do to change the balance of the system. The springs, when they have no tension on them, will move pretty freely. So when the arm is in the up position, this key will always be facing up. When it's down, the key will be here. So this little piece. So you just always want to make sure before you take that end plate off that there's no tension on the springs. So the arm is either in the up position, or you can loosen these 3 bolts a little bit and nudge the springs with a tool, and it'll release the tension if you have an arm break and for some reason need to take this hub off or take the end plate off. So 2 adjustments. If you need to change handing, 3 bolts, flip 3 bolts. If you need to change the number of springs, it comes with the 9 that you would need maximum. You remove this end plate, you take the extra springs off, you add a few rings that come in the pack-in bag, and then you replace this end plate. So that is probably the most mechanically complex thing. And really, there's only 2 mechanical things that you need to do with this operator outside of attaching the arm physically. MyQ and connectivity. So because this is a connected solution, I just want to walk through kind of how this works in our ecosystem. You have 2 onboard methods of connectivity. So you have your radio receivers, so you have your, transmitters, and then you have your 900 megahertz to be able to talk wirelessly to things. You also have direct connection. This comes with Ethernet as well as Wi-Fi. So you can actually connect this directly to the cloud from MyQ facility. If you want to be able to get over there updates, and our goal is to, unless we have additional features, not do firmware updates. So what we want to do is to be able to, connect to the cloud for firmware updates if possible. You're going to need to do that directly with either Ethernet or Wi-Fi. If you connect this over 900 megahertz, it's not going to do the over-there updates. Same thing if you connect it to an 828 LM. Another important distinction is you will be able to get, error codes through some of these. The best one, probably, if you want to truly run it like a fleet management system, is going to be to connect it to MyQ facility, because you'll also be able to get things like cycle counts as well. So 900 megahertz connectivity to the 828 LM and CapEx, connect directly to the cloud through facility, through the onboard Wi-Fi or Ethernet. What you will get with MyQ. So there's actually local diagnostics on this operator, so you can get up to 50 codes locally. What it will tell you locally is the cycle that it happened on, the error code, and then what the error code is, and it'll give you a bit of information and lead you to our support site for troubleshooting. Outside of that, it's now going to provide you a lot of insight. So if you do connect it to MyQ and you're familiar with our MyQ suite, you have the ability to set schedules for the arm. If you have like an event or something and want it to be open or closed for a period, you have the ability to set notifications for error codes as well as maintenance cycles. So if you wanted to, come out and service the site every 100 or 200,000 or whatever that number is cycles, you could set an alert and get that in MyQ. The same with the error codes. If you want to be alerted of an arm strike, you can set that as a notification, get alerted, and basically, get a preview of what your customer would need prior to you getting on site. So there is value to MyQ and being able to connect to the gate, but you still get some value through that enhanced diagnostic screen if it's not actually connected. And then I just wanted to go through, we've done a ton of testing on this product. So for our operators, I don't know, okay. So for our operators, we have 2 different test facilities, and both of those facilities are UL certified in terms of reporting data. So what does that mean? That means that for our products to go through the certification process, because UL will actually come on site to our labs and do audits, and if they have recommendations, we make improvements, but generally we've had UL for a long time, so we're good there. But what they do is they basically make sure that our labs are up to their standards, and we're actually able to do our own testing internally and then report that to UL for our certification. So we have a very stringent protocol that follows that UL standard. We have, from a mechanical perspective, across our 2 different facilities, over 60 million cycles with the latest motor and gearbox, the ones that are going to be launching. And then across that fleet of operators, we have over 40 million cycles on the arms of various lengths. The reason that we didn't launch the operator initially is we had some supply chain issues with our spring manufacturer. So when we went to validate that the springs were good, those springs externally, when we tested them with the manufacturer, we tested to 10 million cycles, and then internally we tested those up to 5 million cycles. We've also done vehicle impact testing. In terms of environmental testing, we do have a lot of capabilities there. So we have rain testing, so basically spraying the cabinet with rain. This is IP4 NEMA rating. So we also have the ability to spray around the cabinet to make sure that there's not water intrusion. We do have temperature and humidity cycling chambers. So we did test this with heaters down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, as well as up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, as well as with up to 85% relative humidity, and then the rain again. And then we also did functional testing. So we set these up in different systems, whether it's SAMs, trap, dual lane, etc. Tested all of the accessories, and then tested the actual battery functionality, which is over 500 cycles on battery backup. So we did take quite a bit of time with this project to make sure that we met those durability requirements and not everything was reliant on models. which is a pretty big investment, but I think it's important to make sure that we have confidence in the product prior to sending it to the field. We are going to be doing a few campaigns. So we are calling our program Lifting the Bar, which is basically, you know, being smarter and more efficient, and lifting the bar on your expectations of our barrier gate operators. We do have several pieces of collateral that will be available through CPSG. You know, we have our standard product brochures and information available to be able to communicate to your end users, you know, about the product and make sure that you understand the story. We have started doing some campaigns. We are going to have a learn and earn program. Unboxing the Magic is probably going to be the most interesting one that we're trying out. Basically, we have different red envelopes that are going to be inside of some of the operators. And if you get one of those red envelopes inside of the operator, you can go to a website and see what prize you won. We have some nice coolers, as well as some grills and some other smaller gifts like hats, t-shirts, mugs. But just a little exciting thing to do to kind of kick off the product launch. We do also have a bunch of sales collateral available, so please discuss, you know, if you need physical collateral with your CPSG branch. And, you know, we also have our LiftMaster support site. So if you need information around, you know, anything that's available, you should be able to find it there as well. So yeah, we do have the following resources available. So co-branded materials, we have our partner portal, and then the ability to get sales collateral ordered. So I don't know if you want to give me a second, I can pull up the actual menu interface. I don't know if there's other questions in the meantime.
I think Tim is on the road, maybe even transferring to his phone to go catch a plane. But I'm looking at the Q&A. I don't see any open questions at the moment, Sarah.
Okay. Yeah, let me pull up the menu interface, and then I'll share my screen again, and then we can kind of walk through what that looks like, because I know sometimes menu interfaces can be a little bit intimidating. So I'll kind of walk through some of that with your team.
Yeah, while you're pulling that up, Brian asked a question: is the arm angle adjustable from a degree perspective? So is it 0 to 90 degrees only, or can we set the limits to less than 90?
So you can actually, they're electronically controlled. So if you needed them to be less than 90, you can. We just don't recommend going past 90. So into that like 90 plus range, if that makes sense. So they're set electronically. So if you wanted it to be at like 80 or 75, as long as you know that you have enough clearance for your vehicle, you should be okay there.
Great. And how long will support last for the MAT version?
Yeah, great question. So we are going to continue to produce the MAT operator until November. So we are going to kind of do a gradual transition. Once that stops, we kind of kick into end of life mode, which means that we at LiftMaster, I think we have a pretty generous offering in terms of service part support, but we typically support our products for 7 to 10 years after they're discontinued. And then once we kind of hit that point where it becomes really hard to get support parts from our suppliers, so we do pre-buys to basically say for that amount of time, how much inventory do we need to hold to service the customer. If we run into issues with being able to get those parts, or if we run into issues continuing to supply them, what we'll do is we'll go into obsolescence. So that typically happens 7 to 10 years after the operator is discontinued. So discontinuance, 7 to 10 years, obsolescence, we stop support.
Great. And the actual finished good that's available today, MAT wise, will be available for a while?
Yes, so that will be through November. That being said, we are going to be ramping production down. So, you know, the goal is to transition customers over that period of time, over that kind of like, you know, 6+ months. But to enable them to still purchase the old operators if they need more time to transition over for some reason.
Great. And Andreas asked a question, will there be hands-on training? I know you've got a schedule out there. You guys are working on it. It's probably still unfolding, but
yeah, so we
right now, right?
Yep, we started doing some hands-on training. We have some trainings at our CPSG branches in Florida right now. And then I believe that there's some work being done with our training team to schedule more. So please keep an eye out with your local branch location to see if they have trainings available. We will also have, when we go to launch, full installation videos available, as well as our normal support channels. Okay, so this is the general screen that you'll see when you power up. If you do a power cycle, this operator's pretty quick. I'd say 10 seconds or less to go through a power cycle. So this is the actual menu. If you were to back out, what you will see is an open and a close. So you can actually use those buttons on the physical board to open and close the gate. You also have the ability to stop it. Once you go into the menu, you'll notice that the cabinet will go red. And basically what that means is someone is working on the operator, it's going to stop it from operating. So it's going to shut off that motor. So using that enter piece, you have the ability to change the language. It is trilingual. So if you change it to Spanish, all Spanish, French, etc. So we'll go to English. The maintenance menu. So this is a simulator, so I don't have any error logs on here. But if you go in, basically what you would see is the error, what cycle it happened at, and a description. And you will get up to 50 of these. And basically once you get to 50, it will bump out the oldest for the newest. So it really gives you information as to what's happening. You have two different cycles. You have basically your odometer and your trip. If you want, you can set that service interval. It is not going to shut your operator down. What it will do is send a notification, basically an error code that, hey, you're up for service. If you do have your operator connected, it will communicate to MyQ that you're up for your service interval. You can also set those intervals on MyQ facility. And then if you want to set that cycle locally, it's going to be in designations of 25,000 or denominations of 25,000. And again, just like a trip report or a trip meter in your car, you do have the ability to change that, but not the overall cycles. An important call out if you're trying to keep track of cycles on your operator is if you do a board swap, this is associated with the board. So you will want to write down either, in your cabinet lid or somewhere in your records, what the number of cycles were if you're tracing that on the board prior to replacement so that you can kind of add those two together for the overall life of the operator. Information that you'll be able to get on the operator is status of AC or DC power. You'll be able to see what your main board and your motor drive board firmware versions are, as well as your Wi-Fi, your MyQ serial number. So not the serial number for the operator, but the board itself is located here. If you want to connect, you'll need that. And then you have your Wi-Fi and Ethernet MAC addresses. Transmitters, pretty easy. You choose the function, you press your transmitter, and it will learn to the operator. Locally, you have 64 slots. If you want to expand that, you can use Passport, but you can basically see how many of those you're taking up. Unlearns all of them. We don't have the ability to unlearn one at a time. Connectivity. So again, you have the ability to connect to Wi-Fi or Ethernet directly. You can also connect to a MyQ gateway or an access device, so through the 900 megahertz. The arm length, so this just helps with the fine tuning. You do have that encoder, and basically this will help with the electronic braking. Limits, so you're going to be basically prompted if the operator is going to be right-handed or left-handed. It will remind you to do a few things. There's a label on there that says to make sure you have the right number of springs and direction. This will remind you that you need to make sure that the arrows match the arm in the down position. Then it will ask you if you have the arm in the vertical position prior to provisioning it. This is also important because you don't want to wind your springs in the wrong direction. There's a physical limit switch that you can trip if you do run into that, which you would have to reset. That will protect the overall drive system, but it will give you a friendly reminder. So to set the upper and lower limits, basically you have clockwise and counterclockwise. So you're going to move that arm up and down electronically, and then you're going to set the limit. It's not going to learn because there is no operator. But that's how you would adjust those. So to the question that was asked, you would be able to adjust that to less than 90 if you wanted to. You would just learn that upper limit in the different position. Force thresholds, it's going to come on low, and if you're familiar with installing our gate operators, we always advise that you do a box test. As you add weight to the arm with accessories, you may need to adjust your force threshold. And what this is it's just a gross setting of high, medium, and low. And what you want to do is you'll want to place the operator box in front of that arm. You want to move the arm in the down position and allow it to back off and see how much force you need. If it's too sensitive, what can happen is you'll get unexpected reversals. Arm speed is high, medium, and low again. The fastest for this one's going to be 2.5 seconds. In the manual, it will tell you what each one of those settings for the different operators is. We talked about the battery backup. Solar power, if you do use solar power, all this does is it suppresses the AC power loss notification, so you're not flooding your error log with that. You do have the ability to modify timer to close in here. It goes up to, I think, about 7 minutes. But basically, you hold the arrow down, you can choose what you want your timer to close to be, and then when the timer to close is set, it doesn't do it on the simulator, but it will actually tell you how many seconds if it's on. Monitored eyes and other devices like edges. If you connect a monitored device, it will automatically be learned. If you disconnect it for some reason on purpose, what you're going to want to do is just relearn those monitor devices. And what that's going to do is kick out anything that's not connected anymore so that the operator will run. So it doesn't need monitor devices to work, but if you do connect a monitor device and take it out, you want to make sure that you relearn it so that it pops out. You also have the ability, so if you have two TECHNAs, you have the ability to communicate over 900 megahertz, so you can pair them that way. You also have different setup modes for SAMs and tandem. So tandem being if you kind of have, a mirrored effect, as well as a trap system. If you do put the BG alarm accessory on, that's going to give a 5-second warning once the arm begins to move. You can turn that on or off. Cabinet LEDs, the same as we went over with the arm LEDs. It's always going to tell you what that motion is before you set it. You have two reset options. One of them is going to be reset the gate, which keeps your transmitters. The other one is the more nuclear option, which is going to be the overall factory resets. That's going to wipe your operator clean if you just need a complete fresh start. So that's kind of the basic menu overview. I don't know if there's any questions related to that or the product, but if not, I definitely appreciate everyone's time and the opportunity to speak with you today.
Yes, sir. Just a couple more questions here. Jay asked, will the error log show time and date of the error?
So the error log itself does not, because we don't have a real-time clock built into the control board. That would have required us to add an additional battery that you would have to maintain, like a watch battery. So we decided not to add that feature. If you connect the gate to MyQ facility or community, you will be able to get that timestamp.
Great. What type of service is required?
Yeah, so the full service option is in the back of the manual. We recommend every 3 million cycles replacing that spring pack. We like safety factors, so better to replace it before something breaks. The other thing that we do is recommend that there's an inspection on whether or not everything is bolted down properly. You look at the arm and make sure that nothing is loose if there were strikes. That all of your arm harnesses and things are appropriately, secure, and that you don't have any wear on those. Outside of that, there's not really a lot of replacement of components that you would need to do unless you have a gate strike or there's some type of damage to the gate. So really it's based on inspection. I do believe that we recommend replacement of batteries every 2 to 3 years and inspecting them every 6 months. That being said, if your battery was to stop working for some reason, like it dies on you, and the operator is connected to AC power, it is going to continue to run off of AC power. You just won't have that battery backup feature anymore if the batteries are dead.
Great, 10-4. One last question here, and there's a couple others that I'll just answer via text here, but is there memory vending included? So where we're counting the inputs and counting people through, I believe is what they're looking for here.
So multi-vehicle memory will be something that launches with the parking operator, but will be retroactive for the commercial gate operator. So I think what he's referring to is if there's like 20 people that credential, that it counts the number of people that go through. So that will be available once the parking operator is out. So if there's any operators that you have installed in field that are commercial, or if you have any on site when that's released, you can do a firmware update and get that feature.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, well, we're right at the end of time. Like I say, there's a few more questions that are coming through. I'll answer those via text, and we will send a post webinar follow-up, including some resources and a recording of this session. So if there are additional questions beyond that, reach out to us. Tim Nordstrom will provide his contact information as well, or reach out to your local branch and we'll get you those answers. But we appreciate you, Sarah. Looking forward to the launch and a successful launch at that.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate everyone's time and looking forward. If you have any questions that you need help answering, Zach, please let me know. I'll send Tim the answer to the one I was unable to respond to.
Sounds great. Sounds like a plan. Thanks,
All right.
everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.